Is the trade deadline a moral dilemma? Let's consider. As I record this video, the Major League Baseball trade deadline is a month away. And for my boys, the Padres, and for every MLB team, really, the question is, are we going to be buyers or sellers? Unfortunately, I think we're going to be the latter in this case. And what we mean by that is there is a deadline in almost every professional sport. I don't know about every single one, but for the ones that I watch, there's a deadline by which you can trade players that season. And every team has got to think, do we think we have a legitimate chance of winning a championship this year? If we do, what we can do is trade off the younger guys that we have that are going to be good eventually, but are not good right now. They're not great right now, not good enough to play and contribute at the major league level or at the professional, the top professional level. Should we trade those to teams who aren't going to win this year, that have good players right now that are not going to be good in the future, right? That are going to get older and they're not, or maybe their contract is really short, right? They only have like a year left on their contract. So you trade these guys for what are called rentals, guys that are just going to be around for a year and they're going to help you hopefully win a championship this year. But that also means that you traded away the guys that are good for the future. So maybe you're not going to get a chance in the future to win. Okay, now that's the scenario, that's the setup. Hidden inside that question, however, there are several ethical questions. And now I'm not trying to preach at you. I'm not trying to say the whole system is immoral or anything like that. But let's consider it a little bit. Because when the front office decides to trade, a human being for just prospects or tries to mortgage the future to chase a pennant right now, it's not the case that they're just doing math. In almost any decision you make moral claims. In this case, it would be moral claims about what a team owes its fans, what a team owes its players, and what is the point of baseball in the first place. So today, let's run the trade deadline through three ethical systems. We'll look at utilitarianism, we'll look at deontology, really we'll focus on Kant, specifically in deontology, and then we'll look at virtue ethics. And we'll see if any of those three can tell the Padres what they should do at the deadline. First, we'll look at utilitarianism. Now, utilitarianism says the right action to do is whatever produces the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest amount of people. So what does the utilitarian GM do? Well, let's look at the buy scenario. If you choose to trade away the future in order to get guys that will only help you win now, what happens? Well, the 2026 fan base gets a lot of hope. They get to have playoff baseball and maybe a parade at the end, meaning that they win the championship. Now, Padres fans, they're constantly selling out. So we're over 40,000 people at Petco Park. Add that to all the people that watch at home. That is a lot of utility right now. If we choose instead to sell, and if we choose to give away our good players to get players that'll be better in the future, we trade present happiness for future happiness. The prospects mature, you have a longer of what's called a window, a space of time in which you can compete for a championship. We might be looking at future fans, possibly more of them, and over more years, they get their joy later. So for the utilitarian GM, it's a simple matter of calculation. But there are a few problems, and the first one is future predictability. Sometimes prospects bust. Sometimes, a lot of times, prospects bust. A lot of times the guys you thought were going to be so good end up not even making the team. Sometimes the rentals, the guys that you got that are just going to be on your team right now because they're really good, sometimes they get hurt. How do you calculate what would be the best scenario when you can't account for those kinds of things? Nobody, not even the front office, knows the future. So you're not calculating the future, you're really gambling. Second, utilitarianism, remember, was the most happiness for the most people, but whose happiness are we talking about? Does the happiness of a fan in 2029 count the same as a season ticket holder that's in section 112 tonight? Utilitarianism says pleasure is pleasure, but is it? Is the pleasure of a person in the future, right? Doesn't exist, right? Is not in the seats right now. Is that the same as the pleasure of somebody who bought a ticket tonight? And the third one, it seems like the utilitarianism has no problems treating the players as if they were just chips in a poker game. If shipping a beloved veteran off to some better team is going to help the overall organization, then forget him, right? Just no loyalty whatsoever. Don't worry about his family, his roots, his community. It's just more numbers in the sum. That would infuriate our next philosopher, Kant. And Kant is a type of deontology. Deontology is where you have morality is just a set of rules. For Kant, he had a specific type of deontology. He famously developed what he calls the categorical imperative, and here's his second version of it. Act so that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of another, always as an end and never merely as a means. In other words, don't treat people like they are a means to something better. Don't treat people like they are just cogs in a machine to get to some ultimate goal. People are the goal. They are the end or the goal. Now, look at the trade deadline. A lot of people are asking about Tarek Skubal, and they're considering him as just a trade chip. Again, he's a rental. We rank these human beings on big boards. The entire vocabulary of the trade deadline is just a vocabulary of means. Now, Kant doesn't say that you can never involve people in your purposes. In fact, every employer does that. The word doing work here is merely. The question is, are the player's own ends, his rational agency, his dignity, are those being respected in the transaction, or are they getting steamrolled by it? Now, the standard response here is, but the players all consented. They signed on the bottom line. And I want to kind of push back on that a little bit, because I don't think that consent is the arbiter of all moral decisions, and which it seems to be in modern America, at least. As long as you consented to something, that it was okay, or if you didn't have someone's consent, then it's not okay. It seems to be like that is the one thing that we say, this is the arbiter of all morality. Let's consider consent in this scenario. If you want to play professional baseball, there's only really one league to do it in. So you consent to the trade deadline kind of stuff the same way you consent to gravity in the physical world. It's not a term you really negotiated or could negotiate. So consent given inside a system with no alternatives tells you that the system was accepted, but it doesn't tell you whether the system is just or not. Also, consent can't legitimize everything. Kant himself argued that you can't consent yourself out of your own dignity, like you couldn't validly sell yourself into slavery. And he said that because consent in that kind of a situation destroys your rational agency. And it's your rational agency that makes the consent meaningful. Consent operates within a moral framework. It doesn't create a moral framework. If he consented or she consented just solved all of our problems, then exploitation wouldn't be possible. But it is. Seems like it is, right? And third, consent only covers parties at the table. The player consented, the teams consented. But nobody consented with the 8-year-old who wears his Tatis jersey to bed. Nobody asked the city. Trades have moral effects on peoples that never signed anything. And two-party agreements can't authorize harming a third party. Consent deals with, is this fair between us? It doesn't deal with, is this practice good in the first place? So Kant probably would have a lot of problems with the trade deadline. But what about our third possibility, the virtuous general manager? Virtue ethics doesn't start off with rules or anything like that. It asks, what would a person of good character do? What does the virtuous front office look like? So let's start with the question of loyalty. Is standing by a veteran who bled for the team a virtue, or is it just sentimentality? And this is a genuine question. When you consider, for example, with the Lakers, I'm also a Lakers fan. The Lakers paid Kobe a ton at the end of his career, and it probably hampered them from doing a better job, right? They probably could have, if he would have taken a big pay cut, they probably could have done a lot better. Or if they had just said, we're going to trade you away because you want too much money and that's going to harm the team, then they probably could have started their rebuild even sooner or something like that. But of course, then they would be tossing away one of their greater players in history. They wanted Kobe to retire as a Laker, even though he wasn't going to take less money because he would feel disrespected if he did. What's the right choice in a situation like that? Well, Aristotle, who is really the founder of virtue ethics, would say that virtue lies in the mean, loyalty ordered to the right object, and in the right measure. Aquinas would sharpen that further and say that our loves must also be rightly ordered. So a general manager that loves the player more than the mission betrays the team. A manager that loves winning more than the player betrays something even deeper. So there wouldn't be just an easy answer as you should have paid Kobe or you shouldn't have. You'd have to do a little bit of evaluation on what would be the right thing to do. Then there's prudence, practical wisdom, the charioteer of the virtues. Prudence doesn't mean caution like it does today. It means seeing the situation truly, being honest about the roster, honest about the odds, neither the false hope that keeps a doomed team from continuously buying over and over again, nor the false despair that has you sell off a contender. And then justice, which for Aquinas is greater than any mere transaction. It's the common good. And here's where I want to leave you with a quandary, because I don't think this resolves cleanly. On the one hand, teams are free associations. The ownership is putting in their money. We might feel they should be free to run their operation the way they seem best fit. And that freedom is not a bug, it's a legitimate good. On the other hand, a baseball team is not just a private enterprise. It carries the city's name. It structures a community's whole summer. We spend hours watching these guys. It binds generations. My dad and I and my kids go to the games together. It's something closer to a civic institution, a shared good. And institutions like that don't just answer to the owners. Arguably, their operations should serve the common good of the community. So, ask yourself this question. Does the constant churn of players, right, the constant moving them around from city to city, does that serve the common good? You go to these games and you see people with jerseys from guys that have been gone for years and years, but they bought the jersey back, when Juan Soto was the promise of the future. And when that's the case, is something being eroded? Or is it the case that the freedom to pursue the pennant right now is worth all that change? I think this is a real quandary. Freedom of operation is a good. The common good is also a consideration. I think that's a difficulty there. So, should the Padres be buyers or sellers? You can let me know what you think in the comments about that, although this year I think it's going to be a pretty ugly comment section. But really more so, I want to know, what do you think about, is this a good thing to have our players constantly moving around so that we can have that freedom to get that best team? Or do we care more about loyalty and people, staying in one team and in one community? Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and hit the notification bell. And I'll see you in the next video. Adios.